In March 1945, deep in Germany, a captured Panzer General was escorted to Third Army headquarters. Tall and unyielding, he embodied the defiant Wehrmacht officer still convinced of German victory. Though he had spent days in captivity, his uniform remained flawless, and his Iron Cross still gleamed upon his chest. The intelligence staff intended to extract details about German armor placements, defensive fortifications, and the whereabouts of reserve panzer divisions. Yet before the interrogation could start, the general spoke a single declaration that froze every officer in the room. Meeting the American colonel's gaze, he announced in flawless English, "I have issued orders for any American prisoners in my custody to be executed. Those orders are irrevocable. Unless I return within 48 hours, your men will be put to death." This was no negotiation, no plea. It was a cold, brutal threat. The words were measured, ice cold, spoken with the assuredness of someone who believed he still carried weight in the game. Silence descended. Officers exchanged uneasy glances. The situation had shifted from the battlefield to a hostage standoff. Somewhere, American prisoners of war were in captivity, and this Panzer General was demanding his freedom in exchange for their lives. Word reached Patton without delay. In minutes, Patton stepped into the interrogation room. His eyes moved from the Panzer General to the assembled staff. Then he spoke words that caught everyone off guard, words that would decide the fate of the American prisoners. This is the story of what Patton did when a Panzer General threatened to kill his men. The prisoner's name was General Major Ernst von Schell. Von Schell led the 17th Panzer Division, or whatever remained of it, after Third Army had shattered his command near Frankfurt 3 days earlier. He had fallen into Allied hands during the retreat. At 52, he was a seasoned career officer, a veteran of the First World War who had commanded armor in Poland, France, and Russia. His years of service were a suit of armor. Escorted by military police into the interrogation room at Third Army headquarters, he carried himself as though he were still giving orders, spine erect, chin raised, gaze fixed ahead. The American intelligence chief, Colonel Harrison, attempted the standard opening questions: name, rank, unit, disposition of German forces. Von Schell brushed aside each inquiry and instead delivered his declaration concerning the American captives. Harrison's face turned pale. "What prisoners? Where are they?" Von Schell smiled, yet it was hardly a warm expression. "That intelligence I will offer only to General Patton, and only once my conditions are satisfied," Harrison countered. "You're in no position to issue demands. On the contrary, Colonel, I hold every advantage. The survival of your men rests upon my willingness to cooperate. I advise you to summon someone empowered to negotiate." When Harrison finished, Patton rose in silence and moved toward the interrogation room. Inside, Von Schell sat composed at the table, 2 military police officers flanking him. The Panzer General looked up as Patton entered. "General Patton, I have heard a great deal about you." Patton declined to sit, remaining at the far end of the table. "You threatened to execute American prisoners." "I made no threat, General. I stated facts. My men hold roughly 20 of your soldiers. If I am not back within my own lines in 48 hours, my standing orders dictate that they be killed." "Where are they being held?" "That detail has value, and I am prepared to trade it." Patton's face remained unreadable. "You wish to negotiate?" "I wish to return to my post. Release me, and I guarantee your soldiers will be returned, unharmed. A simple exchange." The room fell utterly still, every eye fixed on Patton, awaiting his answer to this hostage crisis. Patton walked with deliberate steps around the table until he stood directly behind Von Schell's chair. The Panzer General would have to turn to see him. "Tell me, General Von Schell, do you know what becomes of officers who execute prisoners of war?" Von Schell's spine stiffened a fraction. "I am operating. Under the laws of war, prisoners become liabilities during a retreat, regrettable but necessary," Von Schell answered. Patton's voice remained quiet and steady. "That is not what I asked. I asked whether you know what happens to officers who execute prisoners." Von Schell turned his head slightly. "I assume they are tried as war criminals." "Correct, war criminals. And do you know what is done with war criminals?" "The Geneva Convention requires." "The Geneva Convention," Patton cut in, "does not apply to those who execute prisoners. Such men receive trials, very short trials, and then they are hanged." He circled back to stand before Von Schell. "So let me tell you what is truly happening here. You are in my headquarters, in my custody, boasting that you have ordered the execution of American troops. You believe that gives you leverage. You believe I will set you free to save those lives. Patton leaned forward, planting his hands on the table. You are mistaken. For the first time, von Scholl's composure showed a visible crack. Would you really let your own men die? He asked. Patton answered that he would never allow his men to die if he could prevent it, but releasing a war criminal was not a price he would pay. Straightening up, he told von Scholl that things would happen differently now, and turned to Colonel Harrison. He demanded a map of the Frankfurt area, every intelligence report they had on German positions in that sector, and a radio. Harrison moved quickly, and von Scholl watched him leave before turning back to Patton. What are you doing? He asked. Patton replied that he was going to find von Scholl's men. He was going to find those American prisoners. I intend to bring them back, and you have 48 hours. Von Scholl insisted it was impossible. The terrain was too vast, and his forces were scattered. Patton was wasting time he didn't have. Smiling, Patton told him he had just made his second mistake. When von Scholl asked what the first was, Patton said it was threatening him inside his own headquarters. Patton pulled out a chair and sat down across from von Scholl. Your second mistake was assuming I need your cooperation. He then pointed out that von Scholl had already told him several crucial things, that he commanded the 17th Panzer Division, that he had been captured near Frankfurt 3 days ago, and that around 20 American prisoners were involved. Patton counted these points off on his fingers. That gives me a unit, a location, and a time frame, he continued. His intelligence officers, he said, were exceptionally good at their jobs. They knew where the 17th Panzer had been positioned. They knew the routes his men would have taken during retreat, and they knew where prisoners would most likely be held. Von Scholl's face had gone pale. Patton told him he had thought he was being clever by holding back the exact location, but he had already given enough information to narrow the search area considerably. Leaning back, Patton added that he also possessed something von Scholl did not. When asked what that was, he answered, the Third Army, with thousands of men, hundreds of tanks, aircraft, and radio intercept teams. And I have 48 hours to tear apart every barn, every basement, every possible hiding place in that sector, until I find those prisoners. Harrison returned with maps and radio equipment, and Patton spread the maps out on the table, instructing Harrison to show him where the 17th Panzer was last confirmed. Harrison pointed to several positions, and Patton studied them closely. Patton asked whether these were the retreat routes, and Harrison confirmed that German forces had fallen back along those roads. Patton traced possible paths with his finger, reasoning aloud that prisoners would slow down any retreat, so the Germans would have needed to secure them somewhere close to their original positions. It would have to be a place where a small guard force could be left behind. Patton looked at von Scholl and observed that his men were exhausted from running and lacked the resources to move prisoners far. They would have placed them within a few miles of where the capture occurred. He then indicated 3 locations on the map. There, and there, he said, abandoned farms, out of the way and easy to guard. Grabbing the radio handset, he called for the 4th Armored Division, and within seconds he was speaking to a tank commander. Patton ordered 3 platoons for full reconnaissance at those coordinates, telling the commander to look for approximately 20 American prisoners guarded by a German rearguard. He wanted them found within the next 6 hours. He supplied the coordinates, signed off, and looked back at von Scholl. Your 48 hours just became 6 hours, Patton said. My men are moving now. Von Scholl stared at him, insisting he was bluffing. It was impossible. Patton replied, I'm not bluffing. I'm executing. That's what I do. You threaten, I act. Patton stood up and told von Scholl that he had wanted to play games with American lives fine. Now he would sit there and wait, while Patton found those men without his help. If he was wrong, if they weren't where he thought, if his men didn't find them in time, Patton's face went cold. Then I'll make sure, he continued, saying von Scholl would be the first to find out what happened to war criminals who execute prisoners. At the door, he stopped and added that von Scholl would not leave that room until the prisoners were recovered. If anything happened to them, he would answer for it personally. The door closed, leaving von Scholl alone except for the 2 MPs behind him. 4 hours later, the radio crackled. 3rd Army HQ, this is Recon 4. We've located the prisoners. I repeat, we have located the American prisoners. Patton grabbed the handset and asked about their condition. All alive, sir. Some wounded but ambulatory. German guards surrendered without resistance when they saw our tanks. Patton ordered him to secure the area, get the men medical attention, and transport them to the nearest field hospital. The commander added that the prisoners said their guards had been ordered to execute them at dawn tomorrow if their commanding officer didn't return. Patton's jaw tightened. He asked how many guards there were. 6, all captured. He ordered them, brought in for interrogation to confirm those orders. Setting down the handset, he walked back to the interrogation room. Von Scholl looked up as Patton entered, and Patton informed him that all 20 of his men had been found alive. Von Scholl's face showed relief, then confusion, then resignation. Patton continued, saying that the German guards had confirmed his execution orders, which had been set for dawn the next day. That made von Scholl guilty of conspiracy to commit war crimes. Von Scholl claimed he had only been trying to negotiate his release. But Patton countered that the threat had forced him to act, and the threat itself had made him a war criminal. There was a difference. Patton sat down across from him again. He explained how he operated. Von Scholl had thought that threatening American lives would give him leverage, that Patton would trade him for his men. But Patton did not negotiate with people who threatened his soldiers. Leaning forward, Patton declared that he found his soldiers, rescued them, and then made certain that the people who threatened them never threatened anyone again. Von Scholl said nothing. Patton then told him he would be tried for ordering the execution of prisoners of war, and his own guards would testify. The American prisoners will take the stand, and I will personally testify about this exchange. I never gave a definitive order for their execution. It was contingent on circumstances. Your command was the one that sealed it. A condition that only concerned timing still constitutes a war crime. Patton rose to his feet. You made a fatal miscalculation. General, you believed I cared more about your safety than about recovering my men. You were mistaken. A week later, Major General Ernst von Schell was brought before a military tribunal. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His own guards testified that he had issued explicit instructions to execute the American prisoners if he did not return. The 20 rescued Americans also testified, recounting how they had been told they would face a firing squad at dawn. Patton himself took the stand, describing von Schell's attempt to use the prisoners' lives as leverage for his own freedom. The tribunal deliberated for less than 3 hours before reaching its verdict. Guilty of conspiracy to commit war crimes. The penalty handed down was death by hanging. In his final appeal, von Schell argued that he had never truly intended to carry out the executions, that the order was nothing more than a bluff to secure his release. The appeal was rejected. Intent was irrelevant. He had given the order, and that was enough. 2 weeks after the trial, the sentence was carried out. Von Schell walked to the gallows, still insisting that he had acted within the accepted rules of warfare. The 20 American prisoners he had threatened to execute were there to witness it, eager to see justice delivered to the man who had nearly ended their lives. In later years, military historians would scrutinize Patton's response to von Schell's threat. Some believed he should have negotiated to ensure the prisoners' immediate safety, removing any risk to their lives. Others argued that negotiating would have created a dangerous precedent, teaching every captured German officer that threatening prisoners was a viable bargaining strategy. Patton had chosen a different course: strike faster than the threat, find the prisoners before the deadline, and eliminate the hostage situation altogether. It was a gamble. If he had misjudged the location, if his reconnaissance teams had been too late, the outcome could have been catastrophic. But he had been right. His willingness to call von Schell's bluff saved 20 American lives, while also ensuring that a war criminal met justice. What's your perspective? Was Patton right to refuse negotiations and embrace the risk, or should he have traded von Schell for the prisoners' immediate safety? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more forgotten stories from World War II, be sure to subscribe. Because some of the most critical decisions of the war were not made on the battlefield. They were made in interrogation rooms by commanders who refused to allow enemy threats to control American actions.